Is stereotype threat the currently popular theory that blacks average lower scores on cognitive tests in response to stereotypes held by the testers are just a product of publication bias? Publication bias defined as, quote, the tendency for researchers, editors, and pharmaceutical companies to handle the reporting of experimental results that are positive, i.e. they show a significant finding, differently from results that are negative, i.e. supporting the null hypothesis, or are inconclusive. Well, it looks like it. The recent whistleblowing, when this post was written, the recent whistleblowing of emails from within the Climate Research Unit of East Anglia University plotting the manipulation of research results demonstrated again the unsurprising effects on scientists of incentives. You get more of what you pay for. It's hardly surprising that some climate scientists want climate to be considered a very big deal. Nor is it startling that, for example, more medical journal articles tend to get published when a drug company's clinical trial of a new drug turned out positively than when it had no effect. After all, who paid for the trial? So what about IQ research? When you consider how our society's reward system is structured, what's actually striking is psychologists aren't more corrupted by career considerations. Nothing is worse for your future in academia than simply mentioning in public the body of research on IQ. Ask geneticist James D. Watson. Conversely, nothing could be better for your career than to come up with a politically correct finding about IQ, the most unpopular topic in the human sciences. Yet, the facts about IQ tend to be so one-sided that the anti-IQ case has been largely left to be argued by lightweights, such as business book author Malcolm Gladwell. Over the last 15 years, the most popular theory about IQ has been the stereotype threat. The New York Times summarized it in its 2009 Year in Ideas featurette on the purported Obama effect. The widespread assumption that the politician's success might raise black test scores. Quote, in 1995, two Stanford psychologists, Claude Steele, I think that's how it's pronounced, and Joshua Aronson demonstrated that African American college students did worse on tests of academic ability when they were exposed beforehand to suggestions that they were being judged according to their race. Steele and Aronson hypothesized that this effect, which they labeled stereotype threat, might explain part of the persistent achievement gap between white and black students. In years since, this idea has spread throughout the social sciences. Sure it has. I summarized the logic behind this extrapolation in my 2004 VDare.com article, Occam's Butter Knife. Quote, at some point back in the midst of time, a stereotype somehow emerged that blacks do less well on the SAT. So now, blacks are seized by panic over the possibility they might mess up and score so poorly that they validate this stereotype. And indeed, this nervousness makes them score exactly as badly as the stereotype predicted they would. Close quote. Stereotype threat is a beautiful theory. Indeed, I myself often felt that there might even be a little bit of truth to the idea that expectations matter, even though common sense suggests that incentives matter more. But now it turns out that the vaunted evidence for this wildly popular concept rests heavily upon another effect, the file drawer effect, defined as, quote, the practice of researchers filing away studies with negative outcomes, close quote. We seem to have another Climate Research Unit scandal on our hands. A researcher who doesn't want his name or any potentially identifying information mentioned for unfortunately obvious career reasons recently attended a presentation at a scientific conference. Here is his summary of what he heard. Quote, one talk presented a meta-analysis of stereotype threat studies. The presenter was able to find a ton of unpublished studies. The overall conclusion is that stereotype threat does not exist. The unpublished and published studies were compared on many indices of quality, including sample size, and the only variable predicting publication was whether a significant effect of stereotype threat was found. This is quite embarrassing for psychology as a science. Here's the abstract of the presentation, blah, 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 blah. They have a link there. The link is dead, unfortunately. However, Wikipedia linked to this presentation, and various other sites linked to this presentation, so it's not just VDare referencing a dead link. Wikipedia referenced this link as well, and their interpretation and the key quote that they got from it is the same as the key quote that VDare got from it. Continuing, numerous laboratory experiments have been conducted to show that African Americans' cognitive test performance suffers under stereotype threat, i.e. the fear of confirming negative stereotypes concerning one's group. A meta-analysis of 55 published and unpublished studies of this effect shows clear signs of publication bias. In other words, if a study doesn't find the existence of stereotype threat, it's less likely to see the light of day. Positive results are more appealing to journal editors, and politically correct positive results are loveliest of all. In contrast, how much of a market is there for punching holes in society's fondest hopes? Just me talking here. I think there is a little bit of a market for that. There's a bit of a market to be a contrarian, and there's a bit of a market to be contrarian on issues even as sacred as these. But point taken, there's a much bigger market in towing the line. The Dutch researchers continue, quote, "The effect varies widely across studies and is generally small. Although elite university undergraduates may underperform on cognitive tests due to stereotype threat, this effect does not generalize to non-adapted standardized tests, high-stakes settings, and less academically gifted test takers." Note that stereotype threat mostly seems to exist in settings where test takers, such as elite university undergraduates, are smart enough to pick up on researchers' hints about what results they hope to publish. In the marketing research industry, it's well known that survey respondents tend to respond with the answers that they surmise the pollster wants. Human beings like to be cooperative if it doesn't cost them anything. Similarly, it's likely not hard for black students at top research universities to gather that they can benefit their professor with a publishable paper just by working less diligently. This is me talking. Furthermore, black students at elite universities know how averages work. And so when they go into a setting and say, hey, black people are less intelligent on average, well, this is something that these students have heard for quite some time, probably all their life, and yet they were able to get in, yet they were able to get the SAT score. And I have my own little post on stereotype threat. Just, a little observation of the circumstance reveals that it's extremely implausible that the results of Steele and Aronson's study came from anything other than either overt fraud, that is just the study was completely fraudulent, or that the black students knew what was going on and knew the political ramifications of their performance on this test, and so chose to perform poorly when those poor results would be used to support a certain ideology. Anyway, continuing. Moreover, stereotype threat doesn't seem to exist where the test is important enough to matter to the students. That's not shocking either. One obvious problem with the notion that stereotype threat was proven was that it would be flagrantly unethical for researchers to try to artificially induce lower test scores among blacks but not whites on high-stake tests such as the graduate record exam. Hence, Most of the published evidence for the syndrome comes from meaningless tests concocted by the researchers, tests that don't matter much to the students. In fact, Claude Steely's original study found that he could get his black students to score worse on his made-up test than their SAT scores would predict, not that he could lower their high-stakes tests or get them to score better on a meaningless one. In a 2004 article in The American Psychologist, Paul R. Sackett, Chaitra M. Hardinson, and Michael J. Cullen reported, quote, "Thus, rather than showing that eliminating threat eliminates the large score gap on standardized tests, the research actually shows something very different. Specifically, absent stereotype threat, the African-American white difference is just what one would expect based on the African-American white difference in SAT scores, whereas in the presence of stereotype threat, the difference is larger than would be expected based on the difference in SAT scores." In summary, Witchers and Dehaan found, quote, "Stereotype threat cannot explain the difference in mean cognitive test performance between African Americans and European Americans," close quote. It has long been obvious that what we at VDare.com call race denial has deep, non-scientific motivations. It's no surprise that it can involve fraud.